In my opinion, Oleksandr Usyk should retire right now at the top. He's completed boxing. He's conquered the sport. There's nothing else to achieve. Undisputed cruiserweight champion and the greatest cruiserweight of all time, by the way. I think I might have been the first content creator on YouTube to publicly say that Usyk is the greatest cruiserweight of all time. Yes, better than Holyfield. The videos are still up from several years ago of me saying that. The cruiserweight division that Usyk conquered was far better than the cruiserweight division that Holyfield conquered. When Holyfield became cruiserweight champion, it was a very young division. Brand new, in fact. When Usyk conquered it, the division was much more mature at that stage. There was a lot more cruiserweights around. It was a bigger talent pool. And in fact, it was a bit of a golden age for cruiserweights when Usyk conquered that division. Then he's moved up to heavyweight, undisputed there as well. And he's not some young guy who's beat up a bunch of old men. No. Usyk was the old guy beating up on younger guys, bigger guys. In the case of the first AJ fight, in the young guy's backyard, and always as the B-side. And of course, he beat Daniel Dubois, an incumbent heavyweight champion right now. Usyk is 38 in January. As highly as I rate him as a fighter, as great as I think he is, I'm concerned that if he carries on too long, and by too long, I think he could get beat by somebody within the next 12 to 18 months. Could be his next fight, the one after that, or the one after that. I wouldn't want to see him lose to a guy who couldn't have laced his boots in his prime. Boxing history is littered with great fighters who carried on for too long, who got a bit too greedy, not necessarily for money, but for legacy. They got a bit too carried away with the machismo, always seeking out the next challenge. An example of this would be one of my favorite fighters of all time, Roy Jones Jr. Younger boxing fans really won't appreciate how dominant Roy Jones Jr. was during his prime. This is a guy who boxed as low as 154, but later on in his career, he won a world title at heavyweight. Think about how crazy that is. Multi-division champion, beat greats like Bernard Hopkins, James Toney in his prime, Virgil Hill, Mike McCallum, so on and so forth. And it weren't just the fact that Roy Jones was beating these guys. He was making it look easy. Folks, the Roy Jones-James Toney fight was a mismatch. You might have given James Toney 2 rounds in the fight. Nobody ever did that to him, but Roy Jones did. So the dominance of this guy was incredible. I've never seen a fighter that dominant for that long. He had a little blip against Montel Griffin where he got himself disqualified in a light heavyweight title bout. They had an immediate rematch and Roy Jones wiped Griffin out in 1 round. Anyway, after he beat John Ruiz for the WBA heavyweight title, there were many people in boxing. I'm talking about proper historians, aficionados, boxers, trainers, serious people who are ready to put Roy Jones Jr. in the conversation for greatest fighter of all time, pound for pound. That's how dominant he was. It's not just that he was winning. It's not just that he was a multi-division world champion. It's not just that he was beating great fighters. It's that he was making it look easy. Nobody was competitive for the most part with Roy Jones. If he just retired after that Ruiz fight, he'd still be up there in those conversations for greatest fighter of all time of any weight class. But he just couldn't help himself. He got too greedy for legacy, too greedy for success. Moved back down to 175 and fought Antonio Tarver. Now, if you go and watch that fight, you'll realize that Roy Jones actually was the deserved winner. But the fight caused a massive stir. And get this, because it was competitive. People were not used to seeing Roy Jones have any difficulty in fights whatsoever, even against great fighters like James Toney. They were used to seeing him win easy. And so Antonio Tarver was the first guy in many, many years who actually managed to give Roy Jones Jr. a competitive fight. And based off of that, people wanted to see a rematch. There was some notion at the time that, oh, maybe Tarver deserved the victory. He didn't. But again, sometimes people can get carried away when a challenger does much better than expected. So people were then clamoring for the rematch because, wow, we found somebody that can compete with the great Roy Jones. That was Jones's last opportunity to bow out of boxing at the top and remain in the conversation for greatest fighter of all time. Now, if he'd done that, there might have been some people for a short while saying, oh, you ducked the Tarver rematch, whatever. Never mind about them. There's always going to be some idiots trying to nitpick about something. He won the first fight fair and square. There was nothing to resolve as far as I'm concerned. But Roy Jones allowed those little nitpickers to get the best of him, and he gave Antonio Tarver that rematch. Tarver knocked him out in 2 rounds, and the rest is history. Roy Jones would go on to be knocked out and beaten by many other fighters, and he tarnished his legacy. Certainly the newer generation remember Roy Jones more so for being a knockout victim and a punch bag than a great fighter. He just didn't know when to stop. I don't want to see something like that happen to Oleksandr Usyk. Now, I don't think Usyk would carry on as long past his sell-by date as Roy Jones Jones did. He's made far too much money for him to want to do that, I would assume anyway. But even if he loses to one guy or two guys who couldn't have laced his boots in his prime, don't give the critics, don't give the nitpickers the opportunity to diminish you after all you've achieved. And speaking of nitpickers, there are going to be some people saying, oh, he needs to sort the situation out with Dubois. There was controversy in that first fight. No, there wasn't. It was a clear low blow. Anybody who says it wasn't a low blow either doesn't understand low blow rules or they haven't seen the footage which clearly demonstrates it was a low blow. There's nothing to be resolved. Dubois pathetically appealed the result of that fight against Usyk and lost the appeal. The WBA rightly ruled that it was a low blow. So Usyk should retire now. He's clocked boxing. He's done everything. Nothing more to prove. He will go down as one of the greatest fighters in boxing history and a unique heavyweight champion because he'll go down as only the second heavyweight champion in history to retire undefeated, the first being Rocky Marciano. But Marciano, of course, was not a two-division champion. Marciano, with all due respect, beat up a bunch of old men. And Marciano was always the A-side. He was always the guy that had things in his favor. Whereas Usyk was the old man beating up younger guys in their backyards, or at least adopted backyards. And he was certainly always the B-side. Now, some people might want Usyk to carry on for a bit longer because they think he needs to add some depth to his resume as far as longevity and therefore make a stronger case for him being a top 5 or even top 3 heavyweight of all time, because the top 3 heavyweights of all time have got extensive resumes, over 20 heavyweight championship fights. Usyk obviously doesn't have that. So some people would like to see Usyk try and go for that, but I don't want to see him do that. It's a gamble which could backfire horribly. I'll explain more in a separate video and we'll have that conversation about where Usyk ranks in terms of all-time great heavyweights. But for now, let me know what you think about this video and my view that Oleksandr Usyk should bow out at the top right now with his perfect record. Don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. I'll catch you on the next one. I'm out. Are you surrounded by mindless bots in human form who adhere to the norm and blindly conform? Who swallow all the mainstream BS and actually ridicule you for questioning things? Do you wish you had more free-thinking individuals in your life to network and converse with? Well, look no further. We're right here. Come and join the Brotherhood of Reason on Patreon. You'll gain access to my weekly topical content where we take deep dives on an endless variety of subjects, as well as my vast back catalogue of podcasts, videos, interviews, movie decodings, and my Confessions of a Nightclub Bouncer series. You'll also get to talk and network with myself and hundreds of other people in our members chat. You can enjoy all this via the Patreon app or on desktop and download all my podcasts in high-quality MP3. There's no contract, no commitment. You can cancel at any time, just like Netflix, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper. Just download the app from the Play Store or the App Store, or simply visit patreon.com on a web browser. Then head on over to my page and select the tier called the Brotherhood of Reason. All the links are in the description box below. And just a quick money-saving tip for Apple users. If you purchase your Patreon subscription on the desktop site or on Android, then you'll avoid the ridiculous 30% fee that Apple charges for purchases made on the iOS app. So if you're on iPhone or iPad, save yourself some money by buying your subscription on the actual Patreon website or on Android because it's a lot cheaper. Once you've made that initial purchase, you can then use the Patreon app on your iPhone or iPad thereafter to access and enjoy your content as normal.